Hello everybody, it's great to see you all again. I hope that you'll find this video as helpful as I found putting it together. Today we are going to talk about the biological functions of porn addiction and recovery. Now, this is in conjunction with the last video I did where we talked about the biopsychosocial model of recovery, where you have three legs of recovery: the biological, the psychological, and the social. So go watch that if you haven't watched it already. It'll explain all of that. Today I wanted to focus on the biological because it's a big part of it, right? I mean, you're talking about porn and porn recovery. I mean, most people think it's not, if it's not all of it, it's at least the vast majority of it. In my opinion, it's one of the three legs, right? It's a third important as it is the others. And so talking about the primary pieces today is going to hopefully be helpful for you as we explore them in more depth later on. We're going to try and go further into some of the solutions, but today is less about offering solutions and more about offering understanding. So let's go ahead and jump in. Okay, biological functions are complicated. They're not just a straightforward sort of answer, right? You can watch all these gurus online and they're going to be like, reset your dopamine or dopamine detox, or, if you would just do these three things, then you'd be able to quit porn forever. Well, that's just garbage. I mean, that's just an oversimplification, right? I mean, that if it worked, it would not even be a problem. I would have no platform and no reason to do any of this. So clearly they don't work. And clearly it's more complicated than people want it to be. I think there's a good example of this. Sometimes in working with people who are struggling to get up in the morning and do things, they say, I should be able to just get up and get cleaned up and ready for work. And I'll ask them to do an exercise where they write down exactly what steps that involves. And sometimes they'll take up like a page and a half of paper going through every single step from pulling their shirt out of the closet to brushing their teeth and putting makeup on if you do that, actually turning the shower on, getting the heat adjusted, pulling the curtain back. If you go into each and every specific step, it actually gets rather complicated. And I think that biological functions are often the same way. They get rather complicated. But I'm going to try and keep it very simple today. So let's start with the section that I would call the three major core issues here. And that's going to be dopamine reward systems, cortisol and stress reactions, how those affect your sleep, and then hormones and nervous system balance. So first, dopamine. Dopamine's often been called the reward drug, right? But it's not really the reward drug. It's more of the anticipation drug, the motivation drug. It is what drives you to do the thing. It's what you have in your system that's fueling you toward an objective, right? Even if that objective is looking at porn. And so it's not just something that our brain kind of, pushes out into our bloodstream after we've looked at porn. Like, hey, you looked at porn, good job. Here's some dopamine. It's not really how it works, right? It's more like, hey, I sense that you're wanting to do this thing. That means that's where I need to give you motivation. So here's some dopamine to motivate you to do this thing. And you go, oh yeah, no, okay. So motivated me to do it. So I do it a little bit more. I move closer toward the goal of looking at porn. And your brain goes, oh, okay, cool. I was right. All right. So here's a little bit more dopamine for that. And you're like, oh, great. Now I'm really motivated to do it. All right. I have to go do this now. And your brain's like, oh, good. All right. So I'm watching your actions. Your actions are saying doing this is good. This is where I'm supposed to put the dopamine. And so it gives you more dopamine. And you're building this dopamine reaction to motivate yourself to go and do this thing. Well, that's, I think, a little bit more of what your brain does for you. And I hope that helps. That helped me understand it a little bit better, because then I wasn't thinking, I'm having to fight some big dopamine reaction at the end of watching porn. And so what I would do is I just wouldn't, super embarrassing. I'd just edge. I wouldn't actually masturbate. I would just edge for a long time, because I thought, if I don't masturbate, then I'm not getting this huge rush of dopamine, and it's making this less addictive. That's wrong, because in fact, it's the opposite. You're actually using more dopamine. You're getting more dopamine by doing that, rather than just kind of quickly masturbating. Dr. K, Healthy Gamer GG, he talks about this, and I think he's one of the first people to really bring it to light that dopamine loop is not, it's not like receiving a paycheck at the end of a job. It's like getting paid. It's like the accrual of vacation. And so you get the accrual to happen, but then you're really excited for it the whole time. And when you finally get to use it, it's really great and everything. And then it starts over the next time. And so knowing that helps us understand better how to deal with the dopamine and the actions and what maybe will or won't work and getting away from it. Secondly, stress hormones like cortisol interact with dopamine, because when dopamine goes down, when dopamine goes away, cortisol sort of takes its place. You have a reaction. Your body is always trying to keep homeostasis. And homeostasis is just your typical medical term for balance. It's trying to stay in the same spot, right? Like body temperature or water regulation, right? You drink a bunch of water, you're going to pee. You get cold, your body tries to heat you up. You get too hot, it tries to cool you down, right? So you get too much dopamine, too much of these things, it tries to bring it back down. You get too little, and it tries to bring it back up. And another important thing to know about dopamine is dopamine's not just like motivation and reward. It's neurocommunication. So my mother has Parkinson's, and she takes artificial dopamine. And if she takes too much of it, she starts getting what's called dyskinesia, where she bobs and moves and wiggles, and typical Parkinson's stuff, right? And it looks very odd. That's what would happen to us if we had too much dopamine. We would get dyskinesia. So the body knows this. That's not a good place to be. If we don't have enough dopamine, we wouldn't be able to move, right? We would be frozen up. We think, move, legs move. And they just would go, well, how can we? You have no dopamine to tell us to move. Dopamine's your messenger for signals in your neurological system. So it goes far beyond just the idea that dopamine's a reward drug. No, it's a communication drug. And then so your body tries to balance that out with cortisol and other stress hormones. And porn and alcohol kind of mimic these in a particular way, I guess, more behavioral, because they help immediately cause an injection of them into your system. And so you might like really quickly get the dopamine focus there, or and then afterwards your cortisol spikes because you're done with the porn, and now it's just like tons of cortisol. And so it creates this really heavy rubber band effect where you're going from one extreme to another extreme, back to another one to another one. And you kind of get stuck in this extreme loop, and your body doesn't really know how to get out because it's just trying to get you in the middle, right? And so the only way to really get you back to middle homeostasis is to either shut you down completely or to slow down some of these processes. Now, for us, we're going to try and slow them down. But if you've ever had porn-induced erectile dysfunction, it's likely going to be that your body finally went, I've had enough. I'm shutting it down. So that is something that I believe can be dealt with and will heal over time. And so don't panic too much if that's you. But going back to how this affects your sleep and your hormones and your nervous system in general, is that your nervous system is comprised primarily of two major components, and that's the sympathetic, which is fight or flight, or the parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest. And so if your nervous system is having trouble communicating because its dopamine is all over the place, and then it's having trouble resting and healing because its cortisol is constantly spiking, right? Because that's going to be your stress hormone, which means you're not safe. And if you're not safe and you're not resting, your body won't turn its attention away from protecting you to rebuilding you. And this is one of the most important pieces of porn recovery, in my opinion. Porn, alcohol, a lot of other pieces, a lot of other kind of recoveries, is that your nervous system is a bunch of chemical ropes in your body. If you ever watch anatomy and physiology shows, they're literally ropes of nerves, and those nerves are like chemical reactors and communication pieces. Like, they're really very physical, right? It's kind of like a computer. A computer seems like it does all these magical things, but really it's all the little electrical components communicating very quickly. Well, you're kind of the same way. You're all these biological electrical components communicating quickly, and that can store data. Well, it can also get worn down. And so if you're not resting properly, then your body can't turn its attention back to repairing these roadways, right? Have you ever driven on a road in the north or snowy area where after the winter, the chains from all the 18-wheelers have absolutely destroyed the road? That's what stress does to our nerves, right? It just eats them up. And your body can repair that, but it can only repair that at particular times. Sleeping is one of the most important times that happens. So if you're not sleeping well because of cortisol spikes, because cortisol wakes you up in the morning, and porn causes cortisol to spike after watching it, you're throwing off your sleep cycle, you're not resting, you're not healing, you're constantly in fight or flight, then you're not going to be able to heal your pathways enough to start really getting away from pornography. Because what happens when you don't have your natural way of handling a process? You have to go to the unnatural way, right? If you've ever gotten addicted to nose spray, you know what I mean, right? That's something that I've kind of struggled off and on with over the years. Talk about addictive personalities. But I will use nose spray for a little while. For me, though, my body stops working very well with it. I get a bloody nose. And so I have to stop for a while. Well, for like 5 days, my nose is just cram-packed stuffed until my body goes, oh, I don't have to wait for that nose spray anymore. Okay, I'll take care of it. It's the same way with this. You're going to have a little bit of time where it's like, okay, you're just going to have to get into this state of feeling like your body goes, oh, okay, we're not using porn for this anymore. I have to regulate it now. Okay, great. We'll make it happen. Your body's good. Your body wants you to live. It wants to take care of you. But you have to want to take care of it too. And one of the best ways to do that is through your environment. Understanding the way that your environment affects your body, I think, is one of the first things that you can do to start seeing progress, to start gathering and kind of convincing yourself, honestly, that this can be done. Because your environment is something that you can affect easily and quickly. And it's going to affect your biological, because your body's constantly looking at its environment, right? Your brain's really good at keeping you alive. And so it's looking for stressors, clutter, grossness, disease. Is there anything dangerous? Am I going to be out in the weather? Am I going to be too hot, too cold? Am I going to go hungry? So it's looking for all of these things. And if you can bring your spaces into a calm and safe structural kind of structured place, then you're going to be able to help bring your body back into that rest and digest state, that safe place, right? And this is hard. I know that this can be hard. I have some ways of doing that I think are very helpful, and we may do a more specific video on that. But I think it's just important to know that your body will recognize, even if your mind doesn't, that somewhere is safe and secure, and it will allow you to rest. And so you don't have to consciously tell it you're okay, although that does help. But you can give it an environment where it feels okay, and that's going to be one way of working toward getting your neurological system back in order so that you don't need porn in order to regulate it. I had a funny anecdote regarding the way that we use like porn and alcohol, and for me even sometimes like working out at the gym to regulate ourselves artificially. It's like taking a steak and trying to cook it on a 1,000-degree grill. And if it's not on the grill, the only other place for it to be is in a sub-zero room. And so the steak is either burning up or it's freezing. And those are your two options, right? You've got dopamine spike or cortisol spike. So you're either burning up or you're freezing. So what's going to happen? You're never going to be able to cook that steak. It's just going to get crispy on the outside and frozen in the middle. And so what we need to be able to do is lower the temperature on the grill and raise the temperature on the outside so that we have a more even place for that steak to kind of come to proper temperature. I love to cook, so I love cooking analogies. But in this same way, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get our body to go back to the rest and digest and bring all of these environmental factors up to the point that our body isn't constantly trying to figure out how to survive. And in the future, we're going to do some more videos on that, and we'll probably go a little bit more in depth on the dopamine and anticipation loop. I think that that's really important. I do want to talk a lot more about sleep. I have an old blog post I did out there somewhere that talks specifically about sleep and some of the things that I did in order to get better sleep. And so I would say sleep and environment, you can work on that this week. So I'm going to post another video next Friday. And so between now and then, I challenge you to try and do some reading on how to get good sleep and just make some very small steps toward that in order to get yourself to where you're starting that path of recovery. Don't worry about the other things. Just try and get yourself some rest. All right. We'll see you all next time. Thanks. Bye.